Recording in progress.
Right across from me. Oh, we'll get started. I understand Mr. Walker's on the way. So go ahead and call Transportation Ad Hoc Committee meeting to order. Oh, madam. Great job. I called the meeting to order.
Pugh, no, I'm sorry. That's McBride, Livingston,
Present.
Weaver,
Here.
Walker, Mackey.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Next item on the agenda is item 2, approval of the minutes. Any changes, additions, or deletions to the minutes from the March 26th?
Approve, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Properly second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Livingston,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item on the agenda is item 3, adoption of the agenda. Any changes, additions, or deletions to the agenda? Mr. Brown?
I received no requests for changes.
Okay, entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk?
Livingston,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item on the agenda is item 4, items for discussion and/or action. Item 4A, transportation road map projects and principles. Mr. Brown?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. I believe we have outside friends here to walk through this process. And so we'll turn it over and have, if you'll recognize, Mr. Jones.
I recognize Mr. Jones. Let the record reflect that present for this committee meeting this afternoon, we have Councilwoman Shakise Newton, as well as Councilwoman Gretchen Barron. Thank you, colleagues, for being present. Mr. Jones, you recognize, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and other members of the committee. You have in front of you hard copies of what will be on the screen. What we're going to do is we're going to give you a little bit of history, sort of things that have been going on since our last time we've been together. Some of what you'll see today is a little bit of a preview for the work session, but there's a lot of other information that will be in the work session as well. So if we can, let's go to our first slide. We always like to start with our roadmap. Y'all may recall this has been our guiding document since we began this process together, several months ago. All of the grayed out boxes are things that have already been done. And so, and I'd like to thank Chairman John Black of the Transportation Penny Advisory Committee, who's with us today. They've met twice. They've appointed members. They've done all that has been asked of them to help us move the ball. And of course, and significantly, County Council has also given first reading to the penny ordinance. And so if you'll look with me at the second row of boxes, these are really the critical items that we need to accomplish together in order to get us into a position to be ready for second reading on May 14th. And significantly, the first two boxes reflect this body's meeting and then, of course, the work session that will happen later this afternoon, where we want to talk about what we call projects and principles. And so this is, if you will, a slice of lots of other items and things that are happening in the penny pie. But this is an important one, and I hope by the time we finish today, Mr. Chair, that the committee will recognize the work that's been done by others, a lot of which we'll be reporting on today, and possibly have some additional input that we can then use to move the penny forward. So with that, if we can go to the next slide. As I said, we're going to be focusing on this second row, all the things that we need to do between today and getting us through to the second reading. Let's now go, if we can, to the fourth slide. I'd like to talk to you about what we call now the funnel. This has become an important graphic. We first started using this with the Transportation Penny Advisory Committee. Chairman Black asked me on a number of occasions, he said, what exactly is it you need us to do? And so we began to talk through that and really were able to summarize the task, if you will, by the graphic. And that is that you all have seen a long list of needs that it's been produced by our friends at Stantec who have been working on behalf of the county to assess transportation needs for the past 60, 90 days. But those needs are not actionable projects yet. In order for them to become actionable projects and perhaps become projects that are financed by the penny, we've got to put them through a filter of sorts. We've got to put them through the funnel. And so the first layer in the funnel is what we call principles. And we're going to talk a lot today about principles. Principles are going to end up being guidelines that are applied by the County Council to determine how and when these needs will be addressed by the penny. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we end up not with just a long list of needs, but with a list of actionable projects that can be separated into the referendum categories that Council has adopted by first reading at least. And you may recall there are three categories of projects that we have been discussing. The first is the community investment category of projects. That is those things that are largely affecting the day-to-day lives of our citizens here in Richland County. The second projects are what we call county advancement projects, larger projects that could have countywide impact. And of course, the third category are comment enhancement projects, those being items that will be expended by the comment in order to continue to run and expand the mass transit system that is run by the comment board. So working our way through the funnel, what I really want to talk about is the second level principles. And so if we'll go now to the next slide. What are principles? In simplifying it, we want these to be guideposts for council and then very importantly, guideposts for county administration and the transportation department. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. If we can go to the next slide, please. I'd like to hold here because in thinking through how to approach this penny, one of the things we wanted to make sure that the council and staff and others had was flexibility. In looking at how we accomplished our penny that was adopted in 2012, and of course looking at the evolution of transportation pennies across the state since then, we want the county to be in a position to address what is a dynamic set of needs. And by that I mean ever-changing. Transportation needs that we have today will be different tomorrow, they'll be different a month from now, they'll be different 6 months from now. So as we think about these principles, we thought it important to highlight that they're getting us to two different places. With respect to the ordinance itself, which of course we all know is something that we have targeted to approve in July, the purpose of the principles is to get us to the point where we can transform needs into actionable projects and then to be able to put those projects into the categories we discussed. We've also, as you all know, we've got to determine what portion of the penny, what percentage and how much to assign to each of those categories. There'll be a lot of discussion about that in the work session. Mr. Weaver, I know you're a numbers guy, so we'll get there. And finally, we want to be able to show the major projects that the principals tell us need to be taken care of. We want to show those in our ordinance, right? We're not only required by state law to indicate the nature of the projects that are going to be handled by the penny, but we also want to be able to tell the voters, if they're voting for community investment projects, what does that mean exactly? And we're working now with Mr. Maloney, we're working with Stantec to start that process, but the end of that process will be a combination of the efforts of Mr. Black's committee, of this committee, and the county council. And once we get there, and once we're able to get to the point where we feel comfortable that the ordinance is ready for third reading, of course, then there'll be a lot of education to be done about the penny and about the projects in advance of the referendum. Once that referendum passes, we'll then have a penny program that will then need additional management. And so the principles at that point will also serve as a guidepost for county administration, for the transportation department, to deal with the project list. And by deal with, we mean take care of the projects. And so it's important that the principles require that there be enough flexibility on how to approach the projects so that we can deal with the dynamic state of our needs, but also that there's a way to prioritize them, that there's regular reporting to county council. One of the things we've learned in this process is sometimes there are unintentional information gaps. So we will suggest to you, and you will see in the draft of the principles as it comes forward, that in addition to regular input from council, we'd like there to be a very clear way for dialogue to occur so that council can have input on unaddressed projects or emerging needs that are occurring within their districts. Remember, one of the things we talked about with this penny that would be different than the way we did the 2012 penny, but not inconsistent with what's happening around the state, is that we have some undesignated funds within each of our project categories. Undesignated because needs are dynamic, right? There will be things in one or more of our districts that need to be dealt with that we don't know about yet. And so we want the principles to serve as a basis on which to make decisions about emerging needs. If we can now go to the next slide, I wanted to give you a sampling of the nature of the principles and the types of discussions that are happening right now at the TPAC level. I know Mr. Black and his committee have been working since our last meeting on April 15th, but we did introduce and had discussion around a number of principles. These are the list, right? This is not the cultivated list, but I wanted to give council a sense for what we're talking about. One of the principles is whether or not there are matching funds to complete any particular principle. That should be taken into account to determine whether or not penny funds would be spent so we don't lose the match. Is the project unfunded from the prior penny? This committee has had conversations about what that means. Mr. Maloney is here today to talk a little bit about that. Other types of principles that have been discussed are the number of residents that are affected, the cost versus number of residents. In other words, are we investing the penny in a way that helps as many people as possible? That's a principle that's being thought through. Public safety impacts. One of the more recent introductions of a principle is whether or not a particular project can address blight by providing better access to a particular area within the county. It's a suggestion, and I think part of the principles will be a regular needs review, so not just letting that list sit and get stale, but part of the principle is to look at it regularly to determine whether or not anything is changing in the county. Are there different growth patterns that are happening, things that need to be addressed? The county has a strategic plan. Is a project that's being proposed and prioritized, is it aligned with the county strategic plan? Because if it's not, then we need to have a conversation about whether or not penny funds should be spent on it. I talked a little bit about emerging needs. Those are those undesignated funds. Is a project particularly impactful on the county's economic development efforts? Or is it impactful on the county's efforts to guide commercial growth, guide and manage commercial growth? Does a project have a particular impact on an underserved community? And to what extent should that be considered as the project is prioritized? And finally, and we talked about this before, whether or not a portion of the dollars in a particular project category should be kept as undesignated. This is just an example of the kinds of things that are being talked about. Procedurally, what's happening is the TPAC is working to put some priority, if you will, around these principles. You can't weight all the principles necessarily in the same way. If you do, you're not going to be in a position to make decisions about projects. If we can go to the next slide. The final thing I wanted to point out to this committee is that we have always considered that we're going to have a guiding document. We have given the guiding document the very uncreative title of the Richland County, South Carolina 2024 Penny Projects, Principles, and Categories. We intend that through the efforts of the TPAC and this committee, that document would begin to take shape, begin to sort of breathe life, if you will, and we would include within that document all of the principles we've been discussing, and that ultimately this committee would report that document out to the full council at its work session on June 25th for a deeper consideration of what it looks like, how it would function, and also importantly, that document would be approved by resolution of the county council on July 16th, which is the very same day that council is contemplated to also give third reading to the penny ordinance. Why resolution? As Mr. Wright and I have discussed with you all, we want to give you flexibility. We don't want to put you in a situation where you can't make changes to what is dynamic as those changes occur. But we do think it's important that there be a guiding document. So if a council person is asked, what are we doing with this penny? They'd have a document to be able to show what the list of needs is, what the principles are that are being applied to look at those needs, which projects are being assigned to which category, and how much of the penny is going to be spent in each category. And as you all know, and I'll end here, Mr. Chair, the ordinance itself checks all the boxes of what the statute requires. The ordinance describes the project categories we've discussed before, and there's an exhibit to the ordinance that we think is very important, which is assigning major projects, actual projects, whether it be widenings, intersections, et cetera, to each of those categories. So in terms of what you will see in the ordinance, it'll be the major projects. And then that ordinance will always refer back to this principles document that will be the guidepost for this penny and the guidepost for how to manage it going forward. So with that, Mr. Chair, wanted to get any feedback from the committee about other principles that you think are important that you haven't heard yet. Mr. Black is here to listen as well, and we'll certainly make sure all of those or any feedback from this committee are incorporated in future discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And also let me recognize Mr. Black, who is the chairperson for the Transportation Penny Advisory Committee. So good to see you, Mr. Black. Any questions from the body for Mr. Jones? You recognize Ms. Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not sure if this is it's not really a question, more so just a statement or feedback as related to some of the priorities. I heard one mention about checking to see if a project was eligible for state funding somewhere else. I guess as we look into refining that more, could there also be stipulation as far as year, meaning that okay, yes, the state may be funding it or planning to, but if it's not going to happen for another 5-6 years, that may be too long for us to wait because we need to kind of begin before then. So not letting that completely dictate and putting a project maybe at the bottom of the list of priorities. Thank you. That was my only feedback.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, you care to respond to Ms. Mackey's feedback?
Mr. Chair, may I ask a follow-up question on that? I know I'm not in the committee. Sorry.
Care to respond to Ms. Mackey's?
I think it's an excellent addition. I'm taking notes. Okay. I'm making sure that we'll get it incorporated.
I know that Councilman Weaver had his hand up, but Councilman, I believe Ms. Newton says her question is a follow-up to Ms. Mackey, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to call on Ms. Newton. You recognize.
All right, thank you, and not trying to jump out of order. So, Mr. Jones, I interpreted the other funding perhaps a little differently than Ms. Mackey, and so didn't know if this is what you meant or also needed to be clarified. Sometimes there might be a portion of matching funds that actually are available now, and so is one of the principles that could potentially elevate a project as opposed to kicking it off the list or delaying it because the state might do it before I die, saying, oh, the COG has funds or there's a grant, maybe we need to prioritize this sooner. Is that also included as part of this?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
We'll make
Thank you,
sure
Mr.
it's
Chair.
clear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Jones, somewhere in your report here early on, you talked about the different percentages of the penny to be divvied up. And I think some of us on council have expressed in the past that we're hoping the Comet will come down from the last percentage they had, give or take 33%. Have we heard from the Comet folks about what they are thinking going forward? Because some of their infrastructure has already been paid for. A lot of the bus stops have been done, et cetera, et cetera. They're not going to need to be redone. So have they given us any indication of what percentage they're looking for in the new penny?
Before you answer, Mr. Jones, also I want to acknowledge Mr. Maurice Pearl, who is the executive director for the Comet, who is present this afternoon. Good to see you, Director Pearl. Go ahead, Mr. Jones.
If I may, so, and you'll get a little bit more of this too in the work session, Mr. Weaver, but I think we've had an excellent dialogue with the Comet. Mr. Pearl has been present at a number of the public meetings, invited us to present at his board meeting. My understanding, don't want to speak out of school, is that you all have a meeting, is it tomorrow? Yes. As a board. And so their board, as I understand it, is working towards an ask on both the projects to be funded and an amount. What's a little bit different, and I highlight this because it caused a lot of confusion, 10 years ago. The Comet funding is truly for operations. That's been approved by our Supreme Court. It is to operate the mass transit system. It is also to pay for capital improvements associated with the mass transit system. And so what we have asked the Comet board on your behalf and had conversations with other folks involved with the Comet, including Mr. Pearl, is if they could provide a list of items that they would like to see funded through the penny to include additional operations, additional routes, things like that that are ongoing, not just one time, for consideration by the council. And I think that's where we're headed. Is that fair? Yes. Okay. So yeah, I would just say they've been a great partner to this point, and I think we're a week or so away from having some information to bring back to council.
So
Chair?
is it fair to say we don't have a percentage set aside yet, or are we just going with the old percentage for now?
Again, Mr. Chair, so it's my understanding that the percentages, which I think included in the original draft of the ordinance at 40, 40, and 20, that they will be something we talk about a fair amount today in the work session.
Okay.
We will then have several opportunities, be they public meetings. This body will meet again in advance of the second reading. And the purpose of spreading everything out between here and second reading is to allow all of that to kind of work its way through. So we put 20% in the ordinance as a placeholder, and upon receipt of information from the Comet, we'll then reevaluate with all of you.
For your next question, Wright wanted to.
Right.
Wright, you recognized.
Okay. Yeah, and that's part of what council will have to decide as far as what percentage will go into each category. So there's nothing in stone at this point. So council will have to determine those numbers. And specifically regarding the Comet, another thing which council will have to decide is the amount of years. So we can't say that, say if it's 25 years that they won't need any more bus stops, because we don't know what may happen in the next 15, 20, or 25 years. And that number will be determined by council as to how long this penny will be. So that's part of the determination.
Very good. I'm done. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Mr. Jones, and if you have to pardon my, I guess, my ignorance, if you will. So I thought I heard you say that the ordinance would have some projects specifically enumerated, right, or included in the ordinance, whereas that's what I thought I heard you say this afternoon. Whereas before, my understanding was that the recommendation would be that projects not be enumerated in the ordinance this time around like it was, or like they were rather back in 2012, but instead we would recommend a resolution, or you and your team recommended a resolution where the projects are enumerated. So did I hear you correctly this afternoon about having some projects specifically listed in the ordinance?
Mr. Chair,
Right.
it really is a matter of degree. So philosophically, we're in the exact same place we've been, and meaning we want to leave you with flexibility. Within the confines of the ordinance itself, let me give you an example. So there's an exhibit to the ordinance that's blank right now, and it says project categories, major projects. So right now, we're speaking very abstractly about what a community investment project is. Between now and second reading, we're going to define what that is. And what I suspect it might be will be things like resurfacing and repaving of secondary roads in the county. So that kind of description about what we're talking about is what we're talking about being in the ordinance. We're talking about more broad strokes. We're always going to crave reference back to the needs assessment, which is part of the projects and principles document, not approved by ordinance, approved by resolution. There may be, in the county advancement category, I say may, because I'm not sure which direction this council will go, but the council may determine that there are some county-wide projects that are so impactful that we might want to mention them. And we'll always give council leave to mention them, but not be bound to them. Likewise, for those that are wondering what comment enhancement projects are, and I don't know yet exactly what we're going to get, but just for example, if that comment enhancement project list included not only operational expenses, but included an intent to put new routes in certain parts of the county, then we'd want to list that information in the ordinance so people can see what a comment enhancement project is. So we're talking about broad strokes. We're not talking about a long, specific, prioritized list. So I hope that answers your question.
That certainly
Yeah.
clarifies for me.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. You recognize Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to bring this up or not, but I did have a question about the ad that ran. I see it notated here in the minutes too. The ad that ran in Sunday's paper, a half-page ad about the penny. Anyway, it cites a lot of statistics, 20,000 new jobs, 4,000 new businesses. My question is, we don't cite the source of that in the ad. I don't think any of our communication, is that like a study that someone has done, or I don't know if Mr. Jones can answer that, or wait till later on in the committee meeting. I'm just curious. Maybe that's an answer from communications, maybe?
Let's see if we can get that answer offline.
Okay. And the other thing before I stop, since Mr. Pearl is in the audience, I just wanted to thank him with the comment for getting that bus seat at 605 South Beltline. Thank you very much. I'm going to talk to that lady when I see her sitting in that seat and let her know you were responsible for that. So thank you for the quick service on that. So thank you.
Mr. Weaver, I thought you said they had all the seats built out.
That's a new seat that I requested.
Okay, man.
And he got it there quick. I'll have to
Look
give
at
credit
that.
where credit is due.
There you go, Carmen.
Director Pearl, when we start having conversations about the percentages rather, that would be, allotted, for each category. Remember, that comment there from Councilman Weaver.
Exactly.
Okay? Remind him of that. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, Mr. Jones, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Brown? I think we're on the item 4B, penny project progress update.
In order to update the council, the committee members on that, we're going to have Director Maloney come to the podium. If you'll recognize him, Mr. Chair, we'll proceed with that part of the agenda.
Director Maloney, you recognize, and good afternoon to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I have in your packets a list of projects, and this is similar to how we've been updating monthly with TPAC committee. So our project managers have been updating this as far as, forecast starts and completions. The first project, which appears to be on. The first project is Bluff Road Improvements Phase 2. That from South Beltline out near I-77 coming on in towards the stadium is the Phase 2 of Bluff Road that had occurred around the stadium. This project resurfaces that entire road at the kind of the northwest end. It puts in infill sidewalks where there's missing sidewalks and adds a signal for intersection safety. That project is in is in design and awaiting a few areas where we need right of way. CERN 2 was not an original project, but CERN Phase 2 was made available by the CERN project being completed under budget. Using the remaining approximately $1 million in the CERN project, we were able to incorporate Rabbit Run sidewalk, which was highly desired, which on the map, they put in Garner's Park Road, which is in green, and then there's shared use paths shown in red that are already there. This will continue up Rabbit Run, kind of off the page in that middle of the page there, going up to Trotter. We just submitted this into encroachment permit. So what we found with all the neighborhood improvement projects and sidewalk projects that do not require right-of-way is we can take ourselves out of the DOT's larger review process and simply do this through an encroachment permit review. So that review permit is just submitted to DOT. And once we have approval of that, that would allow us to get into the procurement process. Same goes for the next page, Tronomakers Newcastle. Last week, we submitted the encroachment permit for some, a little over, well, it's indicating 8.83 miles of sidewalk throughout Tronomakers and Newcastle neighborhoods. And that project has gone in through an encroachment permit as well. So we're going to learn how long the encroachment process review is, because these NIPs are just taking this new route that appears to be quicker. Lower Richland Boulevard widening is in design awaiting for right-of-way acquisition. Polo Road widening is in that same status, getting final comments completed for right-of-way acquisition. Shop Road widening had some technical comments on dealing with pedestrian crossings and certain islands in the road. This is a 5-lane widening with bike lanes on each side and then 5-foot sidewalk behind curb and gutter. This is going through those final technical reviews and will be then going into right-of-way acquisition. We have already started the valuations, appraisals of properties along Shop Road for that project. Crane Creek Greenway and all the greenways that we may be reporting on here in the city. There's a map shown there, and the Crane Creek section we're doing is B, which is a lower area that takes it from on the south side of Interstate 20 down to connect with existing trails into the city. That project is waiting its core permit, and there is one private property owner along that route that we will need property from. So once we get that core permit and that right-of-way settled or easement for that, I think that one will be ready to go with final comments from the city. Polo Road, Windsor Lake Greenway. We had started some preliminary work on this project, but we're finding that there are some certain issues with it as far as kind of being hidden away and not very visible to manage that project. So we'll be coming back to discuss that one in more detail as far as its future. Alpine Road sidewalk is under construction. They've been completing the sidewalk portion of the project to ensure from Two Notch Road down to I-20, then on the other side of Interstate 20 going down to Percival Road, that there are sidewalk connections. This does not provide a connection under the interstate. That was not part of the scope of the project. But it does resurface the entire project from Percival to Two Notch. And that will be starting very soon. We completed and closed out resurfacing package S. That has been accepted. Those are the roads there that have been completed. Blythewood Road widening is in construction, about 50% through its construction period, and planned to be completed in April of 2025. A lot of people have noticed it in construction at this time, and it is finishing certain utility relocates. It has some shared use path poured, but as far as getting into the major road, that'll be starting to happen this summer. Blythewood Area Improvements is a project that includes, in red shown on the map, McNulty Street, and in blue, a new road called extension of Creech Road. And Creech Road has always been planned to be a county-maintained road, and that we're finding will actually cross Blythewood Road, where the two roads come together. We met with DOT Traffic, and they have asked us to put in a signal on Blythewood Road at Creech and McNulty, which will help with left turns out of the businesses, particularly to the south where there's hotels and other businesses heading back to I-77. The county has maintenance of a part of McNulty that goes past the McDonald's and a hotel, and that portion we would likely be bidding that, the signal, and all of Creech as one project. And actually all the way back to one intersection. The other part of the project, which will be a much quicker review for DOT, will be out from Main Street to about halfway out that red line, which is actually going to be what's DOT maintained.
Mr. Chair?
Recognize Ms. Mackey.
Thank you. Director Maloney, when you say they requested that we add a signal, does that change cost of projects or design? Do you have to send that back to engineers to redo design? Does that like cost us extra?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, it does.
So does that put us outside of, I guess, the contingency amount that we allotted?
No, ma'am. So the project budget for this project was a little over 10 million, and there was actually consideration of using some of this money to help out with Blythewood widening, and we still have additional funds in it. So it's because of the final selection that these two roads would be the Blythewood area improvements and not certain other projects that were once in a part of it.
Thank you.
You on, Director Maloney.
Garners Ferry Road Harmon intersection, that project is complete. It does have to go through its final punch list, but it's been inspected and it's operational, providing its additional safety. Screaming Eagle Road and Percival Road intersection is complete. Its punch list is complete, and that project was completed ahead of time, and that is doing its job for safety. Broad River Corridor NIP is a kind of like a DOT safety project. What they were doing, the project there is to cut down on the number of mid-block driveway entrances that people are moving across the multiple lanes to get to the other side, and focus more on better intersection controls. So the method in doing that is putting in a barrier median in the middle of the road. So that's being implemented in this project and is still in design at this time. Decker Woodfield NIP has various parts of the project that are completed. We just received our authorization to proceed with Brookfield Sidewalk that goes from Decker Boulevard up to the Northeast Richland High School. And that is the kind of the upper blue line that has a little green line sticking out of it on the map. That green line is the Chatsworth connector that's about 700 feet. We've worked through with Richland County Rec Commission that would be in a county easement for a 700-foot stretch of sidewalk. There were a lot of asks by the Rec Commission if it was theirs that seemed that it wouldn't be reasonable with lighting, trash receptacles, police call boxes, and things like that on that 700-foot stretch. So by putting it into, a public works maintenance for 700 feet of 10-foot wide concrete sidewalk, it seemed more reasonable. So we're working that agreement out with, we'll be going to legal on that, and I believe we have a draft with them. Kelly Mill Road is a project we launched just past June, and it is extending from Hardscrabble Road about a mile to the south.
Image.
Don't have an image of that. Must have been new before we had or come later from that, but we will get that added to our report. And that is planned as a 3-lane widening with sidewalks on each side. The sidewalks will be key because that is heading over to both an elementary and middle school. Sunset Drive sidewalk, we did have the groundbreaking event for that in the last month, and that is starting construction on the first week of May. The reason it didn't start a week ago is because DOT is finishing up the resurfacing of Sunset Drive. So that's underway. Atlas Road widening, we know where that one is at. That was in the bidding process. We are currently looking at the rebid process and breaking that project into its underground utilities and then street construction bids for what's shown as the blue section, which is what our original bid is about. We'll be following that up with what will be called, and the DOT already recognizes as Phase 2 of Atlas Road that was rescoped recently by council in the last couple of weeks. That will likely be reviewed as final plans and will come along within the next year. That particular item will be potentially a different contractor and a different bid, as well as the two parts will potentially be two different contractors on the larger section. That's a 5-lane widening. So with a 3-lane widening over in the new section, we anticipate those projects will be close to coming to completion at the same time. Crane Creek NIP is another project that's miles of sidewalk, 11.1 miles of sidewalk in the Crane Creek area. That will be, that changed from the DOT review process to the encroachment permit process, and will be the fourth project we'll be putting in that method. Dirt Road Package O is underway. They're currently constructing on Nathan Ridge in District 10 and then starting Jackson Road. Howard Kugler Road is also under construction. This project stopped short of a concern of wetlands and a crossing pipe area. So we are actually going to extend that all the way to the end of the county maintained area by putting in a low volume paving within the confines of what's there for crushed aggregate currently. So we will be doing that. That was requested also by the residents living down at the end of the road and will help with long-term maintenance. And then the final road is Sarah Matthews Road. It shows a numeral sign 01, that should be 07, that's in District 7. And that is a fairly long project as far as the dirt road projects go, and looking forward to getting that one underway. But you know, the contractor's going through the roads one at a time. The next couple pages are the dirt road years 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, how they were originally broken up in the referendum. These are projects that we're currently working on, some of which are complete, and so we will be updating our report with our current updated dirt road plan, which you can find on richlandpenny.com on the website.
Mr. Chair.
Recognize Ms. Mack.
Thank you. Director Maloney, and you know, I apologize, there's so much information in my mind that I can't remember right now, the website and what it looks like. But can you tell me, when you go on the website, does it tell you which of the roads are completed? And then the ones that aren't completed, does it tell you when it plans to start? So you know how we had in the earlier projects, there's a forecasted start. Mm-hmm. Does that exist for dirt roads as well?
No, ma'am, it doesn't on the forecast. It does show you which are completed and which ones we're working on. On the ones we're working on, we're going back through and checking for some of the ones that were previously dropped for consent denial or other right-of-way issues they were dropped for. We will use an appraiser now, knowing a better process for that to, you know, if there was one holdout property owner, to be able to show them the, you know, the real estate process properly. And so we're doing that now, and we are getting some notifications from residents seeing this coming from a particular consultant saying, hey, we want to meet with you to talk to you about your right-of-way. And I think Geo Price just asked me about another one where they're wondering, is this real? And so we're letting me, yes, ma'am, that's real. That's underway. So they're doing that. And I think once we have that, we can establish a forecast on them. And it's just making sure we have everybody in the plan. When I first started with the county, just working in public works, I noticed in Chapter 20 there was something called pro rata, And with dirt roads and resurfacing, the idea is that there's a fairness. So if you have so many miles of dirt road, you'll get that apportionment of work done in your particular district. And it also just ensures we are spreading the work based on what's in each district in that particular category. And we found that we were behind in a couple of the districts. So those would be District 2 and 10. And so right now, there's a big push in those two districts to get, miles of roads built in those and get them out this summer. So we also have needs where people call in from other districts. And so we're saying, well, we don't stop work in those areas, but as far as what we may be able to get out and pave, we do have to catch up in certain areas.
And is there, I guess when you look at this and you think about forecasting, is there, or will you be able to share an end date? So will you be able to say, okay, by January 2026, we will have all dirt roads paved in both these packages? Is that something you can project out?
I think by that time, yes. I don't know that they'll all be paid by then, but, as far as worked out who's going forward, yes, definitely. Yeah.
Is there any process that can be done to help to get the dirt roads paved faster? I know you mentioned Chapter 20.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything from a procedural way that we're set up that limits this from moving any faster?
No, ma'am. And we're using 6 different consultants to do this with groups of projects being spearheaded by all of them right now. They may be using similar, land acquisition specialists to help out and appraisers, things like that. But there's 6 different consultants working on this right now.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Wright?
Yes, and I just wanted to mention, I think there had been some misconceptions about some of the dirt roads that the county just didn't pave them or proceed to try to get them paved when there are certain issues with obtaining right-of-ways. And before it was changed like a year or so ago, 1 or 2 people on the road could stop a project even if the majority wanted it. So that has changed now. So those situations kind of delayed certain projects or stopped certain projects because 1 or 2 people on a road could stop a project, or if they couldn't get a right of way for 1 or 2 places, the project wouldn't go forward. So I think that's something that I think we need to make sure that people understand, is that it's not because the county didn't want it. Some of it was their own neighbors or people on the road who stopped projects from being done or getting roads paved.
Thank you. No, I definitely agree. I remember being a part of those conversations, and I think it is definitely something we need to make sure folks are aware of. I also want to make sure on our end that if there are roads on this list where we haven't even begun to talk to residents on the street, that can happen sooner rather than waiting 2 years. I think there's one thing to be said for folks that have been reached out and we're working on easement, but then there's another thing to be said for roads that we haven't even begun to talk to people yet. And so that's kind of where I want to make sure that we at least are being able to work through that list at a faster pace, or as fast as we possibly can with these dirt roads, to at least begin that, because some folks are still waiting here wondering, will it happen?
Okay.
Beaver?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Maloney, on the Gills Creek Park Greenway project, I talked to some of the guys on the Conservation Committee, and they were thinking it might be wiser to extend the Greenway from Mickle Lane all the way down to Timber Lane, which is the next street over from Michael or Mickle, however you say it, only because Timber Lane has a lot of paved area that flooded, but it can still be used now. And they thought that might make for a better parking situation. And I think I could help the county finagle a donation there for some land between Michael Lane and Timber Lane. So that's just something to think about, extending that greenway a little bit further.
Recognized, Director Malone.
Thank you, sir. We do have a design that's, on that particular project, we do need right-of-way, commercial as well on that project. Some of it, city indicated they were going to assist with. The area you mentioned does cross a few more parcels that would require easements to get down there. And we have a design to get down there in preliminary sense. And actually, that was one scope, looking at going from Timberlane up to a certain point, and it didn't get all the way up to past Rosewood to essentially Fort Jackson area, and so it didn't make that connection, and they thought for the way they manage and operate trails, not having that connectivity was there. So we have a set budget, and if it comes in, we had let the Greenways Commission know, which has a lot to do with the Gills Creek Watershed Association. They're often at those meetings, that we would, if the funding's there, that we could continue it on down.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any additional questions, comments? You recognize Mr. Brown?
Very briefly, Mr. Chair, since you all were talking about this particular part of the conversation as it relates to right-of-way, one of the things that as we look at just the penny program as a whole, right-of-way is so critical. And I don't think that we have done the best that we could do to explain to people that even though that we identify projects, that ultimately when there are landowners where funding potentially has to take place, and they look at potentially the government as an opportunity to get a portion of funds at a higher rate than they would normally otherwise, that also affects the availability of funding for some of these projects. And more specifically, if a landowner does not want to participate, does not support the project, the landowner, him or herself or organization-wise, they don't have to sell the property. And in some instances, yes, the county does have other mechanisms, but in some instances, the county has treated residents and citizens' desire to not proceed as a way of saying we honor that. We don't routinely, in all aspects, always. Some people have communicated. We don't just necessarily take people's stuff. That has not generally been how we've operated. So as you think about all of these projects and that process, remember, not all of these projects contemplate that the county already owns the right-of-way, and that sometimes causes delays because people are considering, they're negotiating, they may be wondering whether or not they want to participate or not. So that sometimes causes what we look at as a delay, but really the natural process is people may not be willing to move off of their property. So that's just something else that I want us to consider as we talk about current projects, and certainly as you talk about the unknowns of the future, as you look at any future opportunities. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee, for listening to that.
Absolutely. Thank you. That input. Director Maloney, or continue on?
May I
or let's-
continue? Yes, I have a few more
absolutely, you
things.
may.
Broad River Road widening, this is a 5-lane widening. We had to convince a lot of people it was a 5-lane widening over and over, that it's not a 3-lane widening, but it's was restored a couple of years ago. So that project is set to begin in about a year, a little over a year, as far as actual construction. But we have been, we're in right-of-way acquisition. We've met with all the property owners except one who's a new property owner. There have been closures of about 20 of the properties. There's about 100. And we're also working on an easement process. We don't believe the easement process memo of understanding with the City of Columbia on utility easements that we have is working. So we're going to be proposing something on that, and we'll likely need help with that. But as far as our normal right-of-way acquisition, we're underway. A member of SCDOT Traffic, Lori Campbell, has met with us, and they're interested in getting one of the signals in early. We said, if you're going to put it in, why don't we put in what we're going to actually have designed on that particular page, get the utilities out of the way and put in the proper signal. So that project could actually have some things start construction before the end of this calendar year. Pineview Road widening. from Shop Road to Garner's Ferry Road, 3-lane widening, adds a signal at American Italian Way. This project is in land acquisition at this time. It received its authorization to start doing that about a month ago. And then Spears Creek Church Road widening is waiting its authorization to start land acquisition. That will be fairly extensive on that corridor. And then Clemson Road Sparkleberry intersection recently had an updated public information meeting. There's another meeting for Wildwood 7 this Thursday to talk about the project. We'll have our project manager, William Thomas, and our OET present for that. So that project also is awaiting its authorization to proceed with right-of-way. There's a little bit of right-of-way needed on that project, particularly on Sparkleberry. And that is actually, not a lot of properties that are needed. So that one could get to construction sooner once we get through that land acquisition. And then you mentioned Gills Creek Greenway, which we talked about. We do need some easements. There was a negotiation by our project manager with the technical college to be able to use their parking lot, and they have agreed to that. So that's going into part of the plan to create a spur over to their parking lot and allow that to be parking for the Greenway. Rocky Branch Greenway is the bottom darker line C segment that was approved, and that is also into right-of-way acquisition at this time. And then Percival Road sidewalk. This project is just received its authorization to proceed to construction. We're meeting with OSBO to get our SLBE goals and then go right to procurement, so get this project out to bid. Bull Street and Elmwood, this project is complete except for final punch lists. The project is operating and doing what it's supposed to do. And then, of course, Main Street widening, we can move that to the completed list as well. That project has been complete. I had a little chart after those project updates, just showing if there's any question. I know there's talk of an extended penny or new penny, and so this is showing the work that we will be completing with the penny. An additional 69 miles of road paving, 39 miles of bike lanes, 82 miles of sidewalk, and 14.6 miles of shared use path. It does provide some interesting information in that when you look at the widenings category, it provides those not only pavement, but bike lanes, sidewalks, and shared use paths within those widenings. So as far as impacts, it is a more challenging set of projects, but it does offer a lot of positive impacts. And then the last page is just our attachment 3, which is a financial update. I provided it maybe unofficially before, but this is so you have it, and it shows our projections. So the lower tables show, based on the bid we received for Atlas Road, what the remaining forecast would need to complete the project, with $383 million in roadways and $36 million in bike ped greenways. Those are brought up into the required category at the very top, and they show basically on what we've have remaining, what we had for total funds, what we've invested already, what we received for grants, what the net remaining dollars are after the investments, and then with these required projects, what will be the balance after we complete them based on the inflation factors that have been added. And so you can see on those lower charts what type of inflation factors we've added. And that concludes my presentation.
Questions for Maloney? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Livingston.
Based on the list right here, so everything should be finished by September 27.
The final project completed?
Yeah.
Based on the schedules you're seeing, yes, sir.
Can you, at some point, for years 25, 26, and 27, just kind of list the projects that's be completed each of those years? So I have a good idea. You
Yes,
know,
sir.
On one sheet.
Yes, sir. We have a Gantt chart. We'll try to make that clearer than we've done in the past, but we have a nice Gantt chart showing the flow. Yes, sir.
No comments, questions? Director Maloney and Mr. Brown, would I be correct in assuming that there is no action for council to take, or for this committee to take? Rather, this is just, all these items were for discussion only?
That's correct, sir.
All right. Next item on the agenda is 5, adjournment. Need a motion.
Chair?
Second?
All right, move to properly second. That's non-debatable. Madam Clerk?
Livingston,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right, we are adjourned for the next 15 minutes.